Hello and welcome to another edition of Game Warp. This is our featured game edition. Today we are going to be looking at our featured game for August, which is Song of the Deep. But I'm joined as always by my co-host and partner in crime, Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm good.
Today we're looking at Song of the Deep. This is another game which you brought to the table. So I obviously have to ask, where did you find this game too, and why did you pick it for August?
Well, you know where I found it. I mean, the moment I saw the trailer on YouTube, I like sent it to you right away and I was like, "Do you want to do this game?" And then you were like, "Oh, I like this. Let's do it."
Yeah,
So,
I think
so
this...
I mean, it's just so it's like so my type of game. It's like, like it's a child. You're going underwater exploration and obviously like I mean, we're going to talk about this later, but this was like the trailers and what I remembered from the trailers, the first trailer, was completely different from what I ended up playing. So, how about you start us off and talk a little about the summary of what Song of the Deep is
Yes,
about?
certainly. I mean, Song of the Deep, you basically control a 12-year-old girl called Merrin, whose father's a fisherman, and he basically tells her all these tall tales of his adventures, and one day he goes missing while at sea. And she has these visions of him being trapped under the oceans and decides that she's going to go and rescue him. And in kind of like a leap of logic here, she crafts her own little mini submarine from junk she salvages in her nets and sets off to explore the ocean looking to find her father. And along the way, discovering that many of the tales her father told her actually turn out to be true. This is a game which has been a passion project of Insomniac's chief creative officer, Brian Hastings. Basically, he wanted to create a heroine his daughter could look up to, and in that way, Mirren embodies things such as intelligence, creativity, kindness, and resilience. And it forgoes the usual heroine qualities where they basically fall into the categories of being pretty sexy or just a general badass. All things that Mirren really isn't. She's a very unique and very innocent sort of character, and the tone of Song of the Deep again is a very innocent and, as I believe Kim said already, it's a very fairy tale-esque story where you're in this mythic underwater world and you basically explore this world and discover the secrets which hide within it, solving puzzles along the way. This game obviously being described as a Metrovania game due to its similarities, mainly I would say towards Metroid more than Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which obviously that title derives its name from. But I mean, opening thoughts on this one, Kim, what did you obviously think of Song of the Deep? You obviously said already the trailer had you excited to play it, but the game you got was different than you were expecting?
I guess for one, I originally expected it to be just kind of like more exploration than fighting.
Okay.
And it turned out that it was a lot of fighting. Like you had to do a lot of like your submarine pretty much was like all sorts of weapons. You ended up being able to collect by the end. You were able to fire off torpedoes, which were like fire and magma, like
Yeah.
magma and electricity and ice and all sorts of those things. And your enemies were crazy because like sometimes to pass through a level, you would have to kill like nonstop crazy sea urchins and like those different sorts of jellyfishes and just all sorts of things. You're just like at times like they're not really unforgiving, but at the same time like it's just so intense sometimes that
Yeah.
you kind of like don't have a moment to breathe. Every time these things show up, there's like the pounding music in the back, and then you're just kind of all worked up, and you're like, "Oh my god, I need to do this! I need to do this!" And I'm like, "Oh no, 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 no! Wait, what are the buttons? What are the buttons?" And then because eventually you actually like as you play the game, I actually like the progression of it too, because the pad that you're using and the cut controls open up one by one. So you don't like you know that well now that I have like the triangle and the rectangle and like whatever on the PlayStation control, those are played. Well, the last one was like the circle. What is that for? You know? And then you're sitting there and you're like, okay, well, I know something else is coming up when this is going to be the last piece of the puzzle and we're going to be approaching the end.
It was surprising the amount of shoot 'em up elements that are in this game. From when you enter it, it does feel like, oh, this is going to be kind of a submarine version of a walk-in simulator game, so something like Firewatch. And the idea is that we're going to work our way through this sort of maze environment. We're going to discover interesting things along the way and just generally solve puzzles. But as you said already, there's this large element where you are having to battle these sea creatures. We've got these cartoonish visions of like anglerfish which shoot like missiles. You've got the aforementioned jellyfish which shoot like electric sort of shocks at you. And there's all these various traps that are sort of built into the different environments. One of the most irritating aspects of the game is probably the boss battle that comes in between, and it's this battle against this giant cartoon spider called the Watcher. And it kind of felt out of place. I mean, yes, I didn't mind some of the shooting segments, but this boss battle, it's sort of like we're having this enjoyable explorational game with some fun puzzles, and then we have the most annoying boss possible who basically at one point just seems to be throwing everything at you, and you're also being attacked by other enemies at the same time, and it just felt very overwhelming for the sort of player that this game would more than likely attract. Whereas to obviously an arcade shoot 'em up fan, then this would probably be their sort of forte, and they would probably get a blast of it. But the way the game's designed, the way it looks, it doesn't look like a shoot 'em up. So it made me wonder which sort of audience they were aiming for with this game.
You make a really good point because in reality, the game only has two big bosses.
Yeah.
The other bosses are all what they call sentinels, which is just a head that shoots mines at you, and you need to toss the mines back at the head to attack it. And obviously, these heads get more powerful because they start repelling you with sonar and all these things. You think that was the most annoying? Like, I think the worst part, like the most irritating part, like the worst enemy was the Red Reapers, which are these red squid-like things, which are in an area called the Maw. And in the Maw is a dark, dark area where you need to navigate, but you can't use your torchlight on your submarine because it'll attract the Red Reaper and then they'll kill you right away. And it's a one-hit kill. So that's the most unforgiving part in an extremely challenging area on top of that. So it's these elements, I think, that kind of bring down the game a little, I find, because it just doesn't elevate in difficulty. Like, there are just so many things that are thrown at you. And I'm already accounting for the fact that I'm not like a person that plays fighting games and shooting games a lot. Taking that into consideration that my skills are not as good, I was actually really patient with the game. But there were just some parts which it felt like it was meaninglessly hard, I guess. That's how I would call it.
Oh, definitely. I think there was certain segments where I was happy just exploring, and the fact that I was in having to encounter these enemies, I was having to battle or avoid. It felt like an irritance that I just didn't want to be dealing with. I wanted to be enjoying the environment, which is absolutely stunning to look at. I wanted to enjoy the exploration element. I didn't want to have to be dealing with all these bad guys at the same time. And some of my favorite moments in the game are just from basically driving around, the excitement of entering a new area. I believe it's the moorage you mentioned already, which is basically this large open trench, and it's one of the only open areas of the game. Most of the time you'll be in a corridor or you'll be in a series of corridors trying to find your way to the next area. But the more it's this wide open space, and having this area which you can sort of basically freely move around was just absolutely, it really hits you and sort of adds this element of excitement that, oh, we've entered this new area. Every time you find this new area, there's always something new and interesting to look at. And the areas that you have to work through are all so wildly different than each other. You never have this sort of repetition. Like, we go from like these nice lush sort of seaweed sort of areas when we start. We go into like the watch area, and there's like all these cobwebs. Later we go into like the Forbidden City, which is like this Captain Nemo futuristic underwater city, and you've got all these sort of mechanical and military sort of elements there that you have to sort of work around. So the actual variety in the areas, it's you can get lost just exploring, which is, again, you will obviously get lost, but for a whole different reason, which we will touch on later, because the map in this game is absolutely horrible. Just when you're going the right way, it's a lovely game to play through, just to travel around and enjoy the areas. And I think this is one of the few occasions where I've actually not minded the exploration element. It's not felt like wasted time. It's actually felt a natural delight to see what this area had to offer and to find secrets, to access new areas as new upgrades obviously became available to me.
No, I totally agree. I mean, like, the game is beautiful. I mean, I was just like mesmerized. I think that's what keeps you going because this game does tend to drag on a little. I mean, some people were saying they played it in a few hours, from 4 to 8 hours. Some people were more, and it was just crazy, you know? Like, I was clocking in like 6 hours at like the 75% mark. So I don't know. I mean, like it was crazy. It was just, it felt like it just went on and on and on. And the thing I think that really stands out for this game that keeps you going is the music. The music while you're exploring is so beautiful. Even when you're not exploring, you know, like when you're fighting or something, it really like picks up the mood really well. And I really like that element of it, and just like the colors and the way they portrayed the underwater and the tales of just, you know, like all you said, like the forbidden city, and then you had that deep light area. I think the although it was a lot of work to get through the deep light area, the deep light was done really well. And actually, in the Forbidden City, there was one part where I really liked, which was like, it's kind of like you go somewhere and then something happens and you get dragged into this new area. You're in this maze, which locks you in. And that area is just these turtles that you need to deactivate to get rid of these like electric pulses. That part was really, really challenging, but at the same time, it was okay. Like I think that it was really creative for the way it was. Like that's what I'm trying to get to is I guess the puzzles in the game were really good, except for the fact now is where I'm going to talk about the map because the map is really, really intricate. There's turns and you have to collect objects from one side to the other side. Sometimes you need to collect multiple objects scattered across different areas in the map. And all you have is that map. The one thing that Insomniac Games does well is that they give you these warps that you can actually travel to different areas quickly. But at the same time, if you use the warps, then you miss out on all the secrets after you've unlocked like a different way to open a different door to get your secrets and pile up the money. And that upgrades your submarine, which is also really important to progress in the game. So I don't know, like there's pros and cons, I guess. Like I don't know, like what do you have to say about the map? Because you seem like you're eager about it.
Oh, the map at times it just like frustrated me. The fact that you would often go through areas and you would feel like you're actually creating shortcuts if you were to go back another time. I like the idea of the fact that there's certain areas where it won't allow you to access because your sub's not been equipped, such as you've not got a powerful enough engine, you've not got a long enough hook to access these areas, or you need to collect one of the power-ups, be it like the ice blast to get past the magma barriers, or the torpedoes to get past the stone barriers. Those were all very sort of interesting little touches, and I like those. It's just there was a number of times where looking at the map you think, oh, I'm going the right way, and then you would hit a barrier and there's nothing you can do to get past it, so it'd be a case of going back around. There were certain occasions where it just seemed like there was no clear route to take, especially with there's a section where you have to collect a series of orbs, and of course they're all in the three most far-flung places on the map. And with the warp system, it's handy that it's color coded, because a lot of the times you look at the names and you think, oh, that's nowhere near it, but you can go off the colors and basically find where you need to be. But I found while the music, when you know where you're going, is enjoyable, if you're lost, it is the most grating and taunting thing possible to hear this choral echo. And you're just like, I just want to get to the end. I want to get to the next bit. I don't want to be hearing this. And it's sort of like just droning away in the background. And it kind of like takes that mystical edge that it normally adds to the game.
I guess like it's different because I think I have just that one specific song which maybe plays in only certain areas in the
Yeah.
map, you know, like it's like this piano music that's going on in the background. It's super enchanting. It's super like fairy
Mm.
tale-esque and it matches the game so perfectly. And I'm just thinking in my head, "Oh my God, where can I get this score? I want to learn how to play this." It's so great. I didn't really have much of an issue with the map. I just kept turning it on. Like if people like were watching my stream when I was doing it, was that you would see me every like different entrance. I would be looking at my map and I'll be like, okay, where do I go? And then I sit there for like 2 minutes debating where to go first and what's the best course of track and course of action, and I'm going, and then I do it. But I think the most irritating part is that you go back into areas and then you are swamped with enemies. I think the biggest thing that bothered me was the enemies. Like, you know, by the end, you were like nonstop stream of enemies. It was like 10 sea urchins going at you, and they're like green, and then they turn pink, and then they turn all these different things, and then they have different powers, and then they're more resilient. And then just like, oh my God, I just want to go to the next part
Yeah.
and get on with my life and see where the story goes. But if I can't get past you, I can't get past the next area.
Yeah, this is again, you're just perfectly highlighting one of the main issues with the game, and that's that whenever they seem to hit upon a good idea, they tend to drive it into the ground, such as statues. The amount of times you have to build statues to open up doors, it was like, okay, this is fun the first couple of times. You know, we find the head, we put it on the statue, and it opens a door. We get about halfway through the game, and we're still building statues, and it was like, we've done this puzzle already. Was there nothing else we could do? Do we need to add this puzzle in? Was there a certain quota of puzzles you felt you need to sort of meet? Certainly by when you get to Forbidden City, it just feels that you can't do anything without it being a puzzle. There was certain sections I would have liked to have just gone through, but instead I'm here messing around with mines which are stupidly sensitive and will blow up constantly at the slightest knock, and it's these moments where you people watching your stream are wondering why you stopped moving, while you're just basically there swearing at the screen. The same as when I got lost. If you anyone who was watching my stream would probably wonder why the shit's not moving, it's basically I've done the aquatic version of pulling over to the road and arguing with your co-passenger because I can't read a map. All these sort of puzzles and stuff. And yes, when when the plays well, it's enjoyable and it adds to the story. But when you feel, oh, it's just another puzzle, the game really starts to drag, and it just basically the length of the game in itself feels longer than it should be. I think I described it back to yourself, Kim, as like at times this game feels like the cleaning of a house. It just never ends. And we were talking before as we were going through it, sort of like as we were getting close to our deadline, it's like how much of this game is left to do? It never seems to end. Does this just go on and on? For example, the tower. You think I'm going to get to the tower, and it's built up of this like big dramatic thing. Like we're going to beat the tower, and it's going to open up this final area, and you know that's going to be the end of the game. But it's like, no, you go through all these puzzles to complete the tower, and then it's like, yeah, you're about halfway through. You're going over to this other area now, and you're going to spend like another hour, 2 hours in this area, and after this, you've still got another 3 or 4 areas to go. And I don't know what optimistic person said this was 6 hours, because I was certainly around the 12-hour mark, and that's not with me and my lack of direction. This is just for the amount there is to explore, the amount of traveling you have to do. It all just adds up, basically.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, it was like I probably closed in around 10 hours. At that point, what it was is that I skipped a lot of the collectibles and all the secrets and the treasures. And I was just like, you know what? Forget it. You know what? And my boat, my submarine can get from point A to point B, fight off the enemies. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do it and get to the end. The thing with that is that like they have very fresh ideas for puzzles. It's like you said, they overuse it. Like the turtle area where I was talking about previously, it was like they rearranged that thing 3 times. And then you had to go through it 3 times. And then the same with the deep light area we had talked about before. It was like build, 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 build. And it's like section. And then second section. Third section. Fourth section. And then it's like, I'm done. Can the top be there now? I just, I can't, you know, like And every section is like it gets more and more crazy because like it's exactly like the progression of the spider boss
Yeah.
where it's easy and then it gets harder and then it's exponentially harder and then it's even worse. The top of the last part of the tower you had to do was literally like you had to like at a certain point we get a diving suit and then Marin can get out of the ship, get out of the submarine and swim on her own. And then she has a knife that's actually stronger than what the submarine can do, surprisingly. Her wonderful coral knife apparently can do that. But it's okay. This is a fairy tale-esque story. You can buy into that. The deal is that, like, she's in this thing and she's cutting off these barnacles, and then she has to cut them at the same time. You got like 10 jellyfishes swimming at you, electrocuting your ass. And it's just like, stop. Just, I can't. I did
Yeah.
that part like 10 times, and I wanted to give up, and I was like, I left and I left it there, and then I turned off the stream and I walked away, and then I came back 2 hours later to finish that section because I was just like burnt out and drained. Like I think that was the word you call it. It was like it was a draining experience at
Yeah.
certain parts, and that was a genuine feeling that happened a lot. It wasn't that like it just takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of like just like being willing to kind of like be resilient as Marin is, no matter how pointless and silly her trip of finding her father trapped underwater seems to be.
I know what you mean. There's the laser sections are probably some of my favorite sections of the game. At the same time, they're also some of the most frustrating sections because when you first encounter them, you can use your knife to move mirrors to deflect the laser. We get into the tower section, and now we have to put the lasers onto sensors, which then move the mirrors. It was this weird change, and you enter through and thinking, "Oh, I just need to swipe these mirrors, and they would change around." But unless you're paying attention to the mirrors, it's very easy to miss the fact that they actually do move when you angle the laser. And again, angling the laser was one of those frustrating experiences because it would always go everywhere bar this one little area you needed it to go. Certainly, when things are going well in the laser sections and you've got them being reflected and you've got the different beams of light flying around, it's really kind of cool to look at. And it was some of my favorite puzzles, obviously trying to get it to bounce into the correct areas. I really enjoyed that. But there's just times where you just sort of wonder, you hit these sort of blind spots and it's like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah. Well, I think this is where we should start talking about the gameplay mechanics. The like because we were talking about the lasers and how they were hard to control. I also think that like our main weapon at the beginning was a claw, and you actually use it all the way till the end, and you can upgrade it and to make it more resilient and whatnot. And I actually think that the claw function was good. I liked all the weapons that were there, but at times it was like I find that it was a little hard to control. Just the fact that like where you wanted to go and things were like when you're moving really fast, things get like really out of control. I don't know if it's to reflect that, the underwater inconsistencies of like it's hard to control everything, or if it's just like, I don't know, bad game design.
Yeah, the submarine, it takes a little bit of time to get used to because obviously it's using underwater mechanics. So it does take a little bit of time. And the claw is, at first, it seems like kind of a naff weapon because you've got to really get the timing down. And I really liked all the different weapons you can get because it does become like a little battle sub by the end when you got the different weapons. Although the torpedoes will be the only one that you use. Like your ice bombs or your magma grenades are pretty much useless against enemies and are really just used to destroy walls. Saying that, I love the fact that you can get out of the submarine and have her swim around a little dive suit. I thought that was just an endearing little quality. And her knife, as you said, is strangely effective. The fact that she can
No,
pretty
no
much kill anything with it.
like note to self that Coral is incredibly strong. And yeah, no, I think that the point where they let her find the diving suit so that she can get out was a welcome change to the game.
Mm.
Because then now you can actually use it to do different things and you can explore different areas and there was like a different feeling to her swimming in the water and not being in a submarine. It's actually a little bit more vulnerable as well because you don't want to encounter any big enemies.
It was certainly a welcome palate cleanse because at that point in the game, you think, oh, I've pretty much got an idea what's coming ahead. I know how this is going to play out, and then you obviously get to exit your sub, and you can obviously move around. You can explore areas where your sub can't access, and it's nice the fact that you can quick warp back to the sub. You don't have to constantly swim back. You can hold the bumper and just walk back into your submarine, which is just really handy, especially when you get in some of the dark tunnels.
That
Um,
definitely had to be one of the best mechanics for this game. Like one of the best ideas they had is like it seems pointless that you always have to swim back. Although like if it's not too far, usually I would swim
yeah,
back. But I mean, if you're like in a dangerous situation, then you're gonna be like right away, try and do it right away, and like try to just press it, get out of danger, go back to the
yeah,
sub. I had that escape path a few times.
and just how things are introduced, such as whenever you encounter a new weapon or you encounter a new area, the game is accompanied with this real fairy tale-esque narration. It's provided by Saban Hewlett, who has done a number of pieces with Alan Moore, the legendary comic book writer, and she's done various bits of television. I mean, she was on Torchwood and Hotel Babylon and things, but she plays the role of the narrator, and again she provides that fairy tale esque sort of element to the story, where she every time you enter a new area, there'll be a little bit of dialogue, or you'll get like a little drawing, like a picture book inset that will obviously fill in the story, and it's a nice accompaniment so that whenever you get a new weapon or something, she'll explain what it is, and it's presented in such a charming way that you can see that this would appeal to kids. And unsurprisingly, Insomniac are working at the moment with Sterling Publishing to release a companion children's book to go along with the game. Um, that being said, I feel that the puzzles in the game, and certainly it's set up maybe a little difficult for a younger audience. I would say this is certainly something that would appeal to older gamers the way it's set out, but at the same time they've obviously designed it with this appeal to a younger audience, and it's kind of in a way unsurprising when you look at the Insomniac's back catalogue, which obviously included things such as the Spyro series, Ratchet and Clank, the forthcoming Spider-Man, which is coming out for the PS4. So they obviously have designed games for a younger audience, and they've obviously done stuff for an older audience, such as like Sunset Overdrive. So this game falls somewhere between those two worlds, and it's again it just brings us back to that original point of who's this game designed for?
I think I have an idea about who this game is designed for. I think it's really, when I was playing this game, the feeling I got was that if I was playing with this game and I had kids, I would want my kids to be next to me and be listening to this. Okay, it's a little violent, I can get that.
Hmm.
But if they're a little older but they still like enjoy family time and like fairy tales, it's like a thing where you can be playing but your kids are actually enjoying the story because actually you discover things at a pretty good pace where like the narrator is she's telling you a story.
Yeah.
She's like, because she narrates everything in third person. We're playing Marin, but oh, she's like, oh, Marin discovers this, and then it helps her do that, and oh, Marin is thinking about, oh, what could this be, and like these enchanting little moments where it's like the wonder of the underwater is still like it's just so charming, and the way they present it is it's just like they're telling you a story. Like
Hmm.
I'm sitting there and I'm like watching these inserts of art go by as this cutscenes go by, and I'm just like, oh, this is so nice. And I was actually thinking, I was like, oh, if they had an art book for this, like an actual
Yeah.
comic book of the story, I would really like sit down and actually flip through it, and it'd be just so sweet to listen to.
The game itself is designed in 2D with very hand-drawn style animation, which perfectly suits the tone of the game and the feeling that it's going for. This sort of fairy tale and whimsical sort of tale. That being said, there was a couple of moments where I felt that plotting wise that they were trying to invoke an emotional reaction from the player, such as the Clockwork Seahorse. Um, this Clockwork Seahorse that you discover and spends, I would say, most of its time that you discover it trying to run against a wall and doing very little else. Spoiler alert. They blow up the seahorse, and it felt they make such a big deal about the seahorse being blown up that it felt like, oh, you're supposed to feel bad. The seahorse has been blown up, and it's like we've not done anything with this seahorse except watch it running into a wall repeatedly. It just felt very,
Yeah,
very so cheap. Am I supposed to be enamored of the fact that it's an adorable clockwork seahorse? This isn't the land striders in Dark Crystal, where I'm going to get very upset the fact that they're being killed off, even though they've only just been introduced. This seahorse was meaningless to me, and I don't know, this just cold and callous. I didn't care about the seahorse, but it just felt like a cheap emotional reaction that they were trying to invoke in me.
I think that everything pieces together in the fact that the seahorse does come back and you have to piece him back together. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but again, that's just another quest. This is extending the game.
The thing is that like I get it. I didn't really feel anything when the seahorse blew up. Like I feel really bad saying that. It was super adorable, but like I was genuinely like the only thing that I cared about was discovering Swish, which was our little Leviathan,
Mm.
our baby Leviathan, and he eventually like vanished. And
Yeah,
then I was just like, where did he go? I want him back. I liked having a friend in the sea.
it would have been.
Obviously he does show up again,
Yeah.
and it's really nice the way that he does because in a way that like this is what the game seems to like to do in this way where every time you think something's gone, it'll come back
Mm.
to do it. And it could be like what you said, it expands the game, like it just extends it. It drags on the story a little bit longer. Like I think that that's the thing is I think this is where we should talk about the story, I guess we're jumping into now. I like the story. I think that it's done quite well. Like the way it's presented, the way it's narrated, we talked about, it's great.
Yeah.
But then the story felt like it didn't have to be so long unless they were really trying to. I understand that they were trying to push also like environmental issues as well as like the care for the underwater population. I get all that and it's so charming and sometimes you just forget about it dragging on. Every time a cutscene comes by, I forget that this game was dragging on.
Okay.
But then when it goes back into the gameplay, I'm like, oh man, another section. I have to go to 4 places or something, and I'm like, oh no, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it definitely suffered from Super Mario Bros. Syndrome in the fact that it was basically like the end of every Super Mario Bros. Level. It's sort of like, oh, I'm sorry, the princess is in another castle, and it's sort of like, well, that guy told me she was in this castle. It's just basically replace the word princess for father, and you basically have the experience of this. It's sort of like, go to this area, your father's here. Oh no, he's not. He's over here. And it's always the most far-flung areas of the map they can find. It's sort of like, yeah, I'm going to help you, but you have to go to these places to get this thing. You must solve this like stupidly long puzzle. You must go for all these areas, and it's sort of like, can we just be more direct here? Do we have to go on this sort of like guided tour of this world that we've sort of built?
I don't have an issue with the guided world. Like I like the fact that we got to explore, and I don't really mind the story. It's just that the map was ridiculously huge, as we talked about. And on top of that, it was just like, did it have to be like everywhere, you know? And on top of that, like going everywhere is not even a problem. It's the fact that I keep going back to the same thing. It's the enemies. The enemies keep showing up. These meaningless enemies. Like I don't even mind like having to fight sentinels. I don't mind having to fight spiders or the last big boss, which I don't want to spoil. But heck, like every time you go back into an area that you cleared, all these things show up again, and then they're in mass, and they're like, you have to always blow up once before you like you die once and you come back,
Yeah,
and then you do it, and I guess that comes to the point where I mean the pro of it is that you have regenerating health and regenerating time energy, which is what powers our sub and all the torpedoes and all that stuff. That I like that aspect, even though it regenerates at like stupidly slow pace. But that might be just because I didn't get an upgrade, I guess.
the battle mechanics are kind of where the game falls flat, especially when you're being assaulted on mass. The fact you never seem to have enough ammunition, it doesn't recharge quick enough for you to sort of defend it, and you find yourself getting very creative in firing off torpedoes and using the hook and sort of trying to do many things at one time. Yeah, I don't understand what you're saying. There's amount of times where you don't want to be fighting enemies, yet here you are being thrown into another fight with the same
Yeah,
enemies. This
I guess.
constant spawning is just did get a little grating, especially when places where you just want to be left alone.
Yeah, I guess one of the neat parts though. I mean, we seem to be bashing the game a lot. I seem to be bashing the game over 1 point constantly because I can't really think of anything that I really don't like except for that. What do you think about the subs and the upgrades? I think that's the witty part is that you get to decide how you
Yeah.
upgrade your sub with the money you have. I think that that's a nifty little thing.
Oh, definitely. I love the fact that you pay a hermit crab to upgrade your sub because we all know hermit crabs are skilled mechanics.
And he waves you bye bye when you finish buying stuff from him.
He
Did
does.
you ever notice that?
He does, and you can't blow him up, as I found out as well. Because that seems to be our mentality. Whenever someone sells you things, the idea now that due to playing too much GTA, if someone provides you a service, you must try and kill them so you can get your money back off them. I love the bolt-on mechanics. This idea that you have this little patchwork sub, and you find all these things to bolt onto it, and it slowly comes together. And the fact that this is how the game teaches you how to play it by not giving you everything to begin with. You get a small number of things, and as you go on, you slowly, as you get used to each thing, that slowly gives you something else. I especially love the lights on the sub. When you knock the lights on, they slowly fade on. I really thought that was a great touch, and whenever I had an opportunity to play around the lights, and I would always relish those moments. So
Yeah. So, okay. So the ending kind of gives you an open idea of the possibility of a sequel. Would you like to see a sequel? And if you saw a sequel, how would you like it to change? Like, just,
as much as this game sort of bugged me at times, I think I would like to see a sequel, perhaps a shorter sequel and one which wasn't so puzzle heavy. If there was more of a focus on the exploration element and some more clearer mapping, so it didn't feel like I was like going through another rerun of like Descent or Wolfenstein 3D, where it feels like you're in a maze rather than like a series of corridors with like a proper route. I think if they made those sort of like minor changes, then I would still be interested. Certainly, the world itself, I find very charming and enduring. This sort of fairy tale setup and the idea of traveling around this little sub, I really enjoyed all these sort of elements. It's just this things such as the length feeling too long, and just as I said, just some of the puzzles feeling too
yeah.
heavy-handed that just stops me wanting to come back to it at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I think I'd like to see one just because I like the idea of the underwater fairy tale.
Mm,
And it's beautiful and it's just visually stunning to be in. Like, and the music is great. I really enjoyed the experience of it. It's just that like of course there are things I have issues with like maybe less frequent enemies, emphasize on the exploration more and kind of like I like the puzzles but less repetitive.
yes,
Like
definitely.
less hacking out, like less of repeating the same puzzles but having more variety is what I'm trying to get at. Like say like the one you mentioned, the statues, assembling statues. Well, I'm assembling this statue in this area. It should be specific to that area and not like the other area is also doing the same thing. It should be something else, I guess. I
Yeah,
guess that's what it is.
you would like more puzzles unique to that particular area.
Yeah.
I understand. I mean, why would the fish statue be in all these different areas? It didn't make a whole lot of sense. And it just seemed like the fact that oh, we've got this mechanic for doing statue puzzles, and we can just we basically just transpose it into any area where we need to put a puzzle. And it, as we said before, it felt like a lot of times we're throwing in puzzles for the sake of throwing in puzzles. It's not adding anything to the gameplay. It's certainly not adding a challenge because you know how to do the puzzle. It's just feels like you're going for the motion, and it in many ways it just feels like a roadblock. It's just slowing you down from getting to where you need to be going, and anytime you're being slowed down, it's just taken away from the game. So that's certainly what stopped me liking it more.
Yeah, for sure. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I feel that we've covered everything on this one.
So what would be your score?
I'm gonna go 3.5. It's better than average, but it's not enough to get that 4 stars. It's as we said, the flaws in it take away from the potential and that this game certainly has. It's a beautiful game to look at. The gameplay is enjoyable when it works. It's just when those flaws hit and certainly the length, it just grinds you down to the point where it makes it hard to rate it anything than 3.5. But at the same time, there's probably those players out there who are going to absolutely love this up. But I think 3.5 is definitely where I'm going to go with this one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I totally agree with you. Actually, this might be the first time we've actually had the same score. I'm also like after a day of pondering it, I think like I spent most of today thinking about it. I was it was quickly dropping into a 3, but it's now a 3.5. I think that I think the story and the music and just the visuals and the message the story is wanting to tell and the heart of it is all there. You know, it's just, the enemies are incredibly taxing and tiring and just
Yeah.
draining to play and it's so unnecessary and it's like these little things that, it's just slimming down the game to make it more tight knit. That's all it really needs.
Yeah, I feel that this is a game which certainly shows great promise. And again, it's another title, another independent sort of based title that we've seen come out, which is able to stand and be comparable to a AAA game. Perhaps it's lacking, obviously, because of the size of the team that are working on it, but this is a game that is certainly worth discovering, and it reminds us why it's important not just to look at AAA titles, but to look at independent games as well, especially for games like this where and Oxenfree and Life is Strange that we've obviously discussed previously, and you can see when games of this quality are being produced by the independent sort of wings of companies, why you now have companies like EA wanting to do things like EA Originals and obviously focus on doing their own sort of offshoot for independent games, because I personally would love to see more games like this, and it's a refreshing change from obviously everything else that's sort of in the mainstream at the moment. So
So, in terms of talking about refreshing, our next featured game for September is going to be. You want to tell them?
yes, our next game is going to be Limbo. And this is actually going to be a bit of a special month because not only are we going to be talking about Limbo, but we're also going to be discussing its sequel of sorts, Inside. Have a lot of people excited, not only because of the style, but because of the storyline as well. And we're going to be obviously discussing that a bit further when we look at these games next month. So, yes, we're prepared for more indie graphics and giant big ass spiders.
All right, so this wraps up the episode of our featured review episode of Game War. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. We'd love to hear your feedback and recommendations. Head over to our home base, thatmomentin.com, to read more gaming reviews and news bits. To get gaming news and releases every single day, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at Game Warp Podcast. To check our episode on the go, you can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Bye.